Hi, I figured I'd just make another video blog because, I don't know, I feel like I express my thoughts better when I could sort of process them out loud. So I figured I'd just do another one of these for the module this week. I took notes and I tried to answer all the questions, but I'll start with, like, if you see me reading, that's why. So basically, the first thing that stuck out to me about a certain definition of UDL was that one of the definitions said it's not a single one-size-fits-all solution, but rather a flexible approach that can be customized and adjusted for individual needs. I think that I really liked that part because it clarified that for me. Like, before, when I was reading about UDL in the textbook, I was confused exactly as to what UDL was. I had the basic definition, but I wasn't sure if you were supposed to give one lesson and it was just supposed to be a good enough lesson or simple enough lesson that everybody could do it, or if you're supposed to adjust that lesson and make it different for different people. So that definition helped to show me that that you're supposed to build flexibility within the lessons you're making and within the goals you have, so you can adjust it for different people. I also wanted to talk about, I really like this quote. I'll just read it. When curricula are designed to meet the needs of an imaginary average, they do not address the reality learner variability. They fail to provide all individuals with fair and equal opportunities to learn by excluding learners with different abilities, backgrounds, and motivations who do not meet the elusive criteria for average. I think that stuck out to me too with the video we talked about how we are evaluating students and whether we're doing it with standard deviations from the average or whether we're setting a pass-fail mark. It makes me think about nobody's really average, and that's why a lot of people, including myself, don't really like standardized testing, because it tests for an average that I don't know, I think we're all so different in that people have different strengths. So if you're basing them on one scale, it just doesn't make sense to me. But I think that's why UDL is so important. To me, it seems like one of the most important things we've learned about in this class, because I think it's so imperative that we start to teach in ways that can really not just that can help every single student if we're actually looking at their individual qualities. I think it's a lot of work, and it can take a lot of adjustments to what our normal classes are, but ultimately I think that that kind of individualized attention is needed. It's hard because we live in a very competitive world where you need to be able to do certain things, and not everything is always going to be able to adjust to your learning style or to your particular needs. But I think that in a classroom, if we can help strengthen their needs in general, then hopefully they'll be able to do well even in strict formats. So basically, okay, I'll start answering the questions so I'm not just rambling about this stuff. So first, why is it important for educational leaders to understand the UDL framework? Well, I think it's important that they realize exactly what UDL is first before trying, because what I said, I didn't really understand exactly what it was. I think in my observations I tried to say somebody was using it, and I guess I was wrong. So I think first you have to understand exactly what it is before you can use it. The brief thing I have is that the key goals are to represent information in multiple formats and media, provide multiple pathways for students' action and expression, and provide multiple ways to engage students' interest and motivation. I think that they need to understand this before they can make goals and stuff, because they need to know what they're trying to change in their lessons and what exactly how it's going to affect students if they make those changes. I think another thing that I thought was important for educational leaders or teachers to understand within the framework is to also do some research into the processing of how our brain processes things. That was in the reading that I read, and it was really technical, and parts of it were hard to understand. I won't pretend to act like I understood the whole thing. I'm sure I could go back and read it to try and understand it better, but I really did think that you learn a lot from actually thinking about, I'm not a science person, but if you are willing to try and expose yourself to the scientific aspects of how we process and how we all process things differently, and learning about recognition networks, they can help us individualize the supports we provide. One of the examples of processing that I thought was interesting from reading was they talked about, especially because I'm in English, so this particular example was interesting to me. They talked about an example where it's easier and faster, or research has shown that it's easier and faster to recognize letters in the context of words than it is to recognize them in isolation. It says this phenomenon termed the word superiority effect occurs because familiarity with larger pattern the word constrains the bottom-up process of individual letter recognition and leads a reader to rely more on his or her expectations of what letters will come next and less on visual features of those letters. That's why proofreading is so difficult. We miss errors because our word expectations are so powerful that they influence how we see the individual letters. That is something I've seen time and time again, especially when tutoring and especially when peer editing. That's why it's always good to have a few peer editors, because one person can miss things. I think as a soon-to-be English teacher, that's really interesting to know that people rely on the outside to know what the middle is, or they rely on the next thing to fill. Like, if you've ever seen on Facebook, people post those things like, you're smart if you can read this, and it's a sentence, but it's missing all sorts of letters, but your brain automatically fills in the words for you. I think that's really cool, but at the one hand, this twists it and shows how it can be almost a weakness, and I think that's really interesting. But I think through looking at the bottom-up, top-down processing, we can learn about things like that that can influence how we teach, and we can also see that each student's processing is different. Some people may have this problem, some people may not, and we could try to account for those differences. So yeah, basically I think understanding the UDL framework, it's the first step to implementing it. So if you don't understand it, then you probably are going to implement it wrong. So I think that those are a couple of things as to why it's important, and knowing exactly the kind of differences you should be making, the multiple means of media expression, and then interest and motivation are key. So let's see. So how can understanding UDL help leaders make educational decisions? I picked a quote for this one that I felt sort of summarized how I felt about it, and then I'll talk a little more about it. But the quote that I found was, we realize that barriers to learning are not, in fact, inherent in the capacities of learners, but instead arise in learners' interactions with inflexible education materials and methods. The flexibility we were able to build into digital books could be used to make all curriculum adjustable so that one electronic edition could meet the needs of extremely varied learners. So basically, I picked that quote because it's UDL emphasizes that it is not, we're not saying there are problems with the learner, and we're not saying we're making adjustments to fit a learner, but rather the adjustments it's flexible in a way where it's just a natural flexibility, and we'll have the materials that are flexible so that each learner can pick or identify what kind of tools they want to use and what's available for them. So I think that having this type of mindset versus I have students who need certain things, you more so think, I have all these tools, which student could I match with what tool? I think that's a better way of thinking about it, and that can influence leaders to make educational decisions. If you have an array of flexibility at your hands already with the tools that you have and the modes you could use to represent things or have students express what they know, then you're already starting at a different point than people who have one standard and then be like, oh, I have to deviate this, so I have to change this so it works for so-and-so. It's a different kind of mindset. And I think that your educational decisions will ultimately be influenced by that different mindset. If you have the resources and you feel, well, I say have the resources like they're given to you, but as we've seen in this module, you can go about getting a lot of these yourself. It's not something that has to be given to you. You can seek this out. If you want the UDL classroom to really be part of your classroom and your framework, you sort of have to seek out making it so your classroom's as flexible as possible when you're making those goals and you already have the tools that you might need and you're thinking about different ways students can turn in projects or make papers, etc. Like it's something, it's at the starting point when you're making lessons, not at the middle point when you're making lessons and you run into an issue. I think that's I just thought of that now. I think that's the big difference to me, is that you're starting with having these things and knowing that you're going to have to adjust things as you go, and you're going to have to use different things for different learners versus, oh, we ran into a problem, now we got to find a solution. You already have the solutions, I think. What else? I also talk apart from this reading that talks about how our classrooms are filled with different kids today. We have kids whose first language is not English, students who are not reading on grade level, students with behavioral, attentional, motivational problems, students from varied cultures, students that are gifted, students that have particular needs, like motor disabilities, emotional difficulties, speech and language. But at the same time, there's standards for all those students, no matter what they're coming from. So the responsibilities placed on the teacher's shoulders for all these different students who are supposed to meet one standard. And I think that UDL makes it so it's possible to try and help every single student reach those standards. And another thing, I've learned about this before, but I think it's key here to recognize when using in combination with UDL. We talk about Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. I think this should be sort of, like I was talking about, how UDL should be at the forefront of your thinking when you're making overall goals and your units and your lessons. I think that this should also be at the forefront of your thinking, because if you're thinking about multiple intelligence theories, you might also be thinking about how you can use certain students' strengths and new technologies where you can use different parts of their intelligence. Um, Also, because digital technologies, they have more of an inherent flexibility than the traditional tools you use in a classroom. Um, especially with the add-ons you can add to digital technologies, um, it makes it so it's easier to differentiate both reading, writing, speaking, um, and also with technology, it's easier for students, for a classroom to be inquiry and interest based. You could have different things where students are doing their own research, or students are using programs that help them create things or write things, or using just different things. So I think that um, that's great in terms of um, how we can think of making educational decisions with UDL. 3. What ways can leaders motivate and engage school personnel implementing the UDL framework? So I think first, I think if you're a really big leader, I think, well, first you need to test and make sure that you feel like you're using UDL in a correct way. It's I think that you need to have it down pat before you go and try to lead other people in how to do it. One way you could be a leader using it is maybe having a workshop where you explain the basic tenets. I think it would probably have to be a multiple day or a really long workshop if you are going to go through on how to go about using it, just because it takes a long time to learn the specifics of how you're going to actually implement it. So first, I think that you would have to teach them the basic tenets of UDL about the multiple means of representation, action, expression, and engagement. So the 3 basic tenets. I think that I think also it would be needed if you were going to be a leader in showing how UDL works, you'd need a few examples on how you could use it. So I found a few in the reading that I think would be just a little good excerpt of showing what it could do. It says, within the framework of UDL, Sophia, who needs supports to overcome her visual deficits, and Paula, who has trouble with reading comprehension, could successfully read the same story using a software program that offers text-to-speech images and links to vocabulary and background knowledge. Charlie, who needs sequence structured support when working on a research project, and Jabal, who can manage the sequential steps in research but needs support for his fine motor disability, can conduct online research using the same program but different supports. Kamla's, whose interests lie primarily in sports, and Jamal, who's an expert on tanks and submarines, can pursue the same reading or math project in the content area of their choosing, thus suggesting for their individual effective networks. So, I know that was sort of a mouthful, but it just shows that UDL is a framework for so many different things. It's not just for disabilities. It's not just to implement student interest. It's not just for people who have reading difficulties. It's sort of, if it's successful and if you have enough tools, you could sort of cover the gamut of all of those things. So I think that makes it, as a leader, I think that really makes it enticing to teachers, especially who are having difficulties with students who have a lot of these problems, or a lot of differences. So I think that if you, sort of advertise UDL in this way, you may get a lot of interest in people who want to start using it when they understand that it's something that could help with all these types of students. I think one of the biggest problems, though, is identifying your students' needs. And you may try to match up student with a particular thing and it's not working. I think that it could be because we're not accurately seeing what they need. The one in the reading, it talks about how to make and use class learning profiles. I think that's also something as a leader pioneering UDL you'd have to talk about. You'd have to talk about making a class learning profile, what your class learning profile could mean for the tools you need to have and the adjustments you'd need to make to your lessons. I honestly think UDL has to be informed with a class learning profile, because if it's not, then you're just picking different resources for different people. And I think that you need to be thinking, what does so-and-so need? What can I use to help them? And so I think that the class learning profile is the first step. I also really like, they give an example of it, and they also give you an example of student qualities. So if like sometimes you just need the words for things that they need, and I really liked this because it gives you a template for how to make a class learning profile, which is something I never thought to do before reading this. I think ultimately through those things you can get people excited about UDL. You could also, I think, if you were to conduct a workshop or something like that, you can show them all the tools that are available to them. Like I went through all the links that we were given to see what I could download, and I haven't downloaded everything yet. I've just been starting to sift through certain materials. So I looked at some of the blogs because I use WordPress right now for my own personal blog, and for I have an extra credit teaching blog up there. But I find out that WordPress isn't the most user-friendly. It's not really difficult, but I think that there might be some better user-friendly blogs out there. I'm looking at this EduBlogs. I think that's interesting that it's sort of an education-based blog, or Class Blogmeister, so I'm going to look into those. I also was going through the PowerPoint in the Engaging Ideas section of the website, and I was looking at the 36 interesting ways to use Twitter in the classroom, because I think it's also imperative in UDL to sort of combine new literacies also. So I think that I think it just sort of goes hand in hand, that not only are you trying to differentiate it by students' needs, but also by worldly needs, because I think we're living in an age that's technology driven, and so I think using technology, using social media is a great thing, especially because the English classrooms can afford things like that in a lot of our activities. So I think the Twitter thing's awesome. I also like the visualness of the infographics. I've never made an infographic, but I definitely think I'm going to use these to make ones, since they're a really nice visual way to make facts, and I think this would be fun for students to make, to really show some of the more technical aspects of information. Comics, I think we're good. I'm just starting Comic Life. I have a project where I'm doing that, and so I'm seeing how that works, but that's also for people who like to see information visually, or like to do projects maybe in a visual way. I also see that in Glogster and Animoto, and even Prezzies, different things like that. What else is I going to say? And then I also like the resources that are just the Simple English Wikipedia and the Simple English Wiktionary. I realize that Wikipedia can be sometimes even more overwhelming when you're just trying to get a simple definition or a simple sort of feel for something. So I really like those, because especially in a classroom, those are simple tools you can go to. The 60-second recap for secondary literature is something I definitely think I'll use, since my content area is English. And there's also sources for audiobooks that I definitely want to use. And then all the Google Chrome add-ons are sweet, because I all I use is Google Chrome. So, and I don't think it would be too hard just to download pretty much all of them and just be able to have those on a computer. My more so question would be, if I get an eventual classroom, how many computers would I have? Would I always have them? Because I'll probably have to sign them out, and they're probably going to be something that you, like mobile laptops or something like that. So how much of this stuff can I put on mobile laptops because they're not mine? And then how often will we have these materials? I actually do think that's probably one of the major issues that can present itself with the UDL environment, is that you may not have the technology always for these resources. It would be cool because I know lots of classrooms where everybody has an iPad or everybody has a computer, but I don't think that's always the case at all. So we would have to think of ways that are not always using technology to sort of make some adjustments, I think. Okay, so last question. Sorry, this is getting really lengthy, so I'm trying to hurry up. But how does UDL relate to current or future practice? So basically, one of the examples that I saw in here that I could picture relating to my future practice was in their reading, they talk about Catcher in the Rye, and they have an option for students to read it in paperback or to read it in the digitized text. And then within the digital version, there's different supports for reading comprehension strategies, like predicting, questioning, summarizing, and then some will use the supports, some will not use the supports, some will just read the printed text. And then after, they have a follow-up assignment to choose a chapter, to synthesize the important elements and connect the elements to their own lives, and then present those ideas to their classmates. But the fulfillment of that is, and how they do it, is completely up to them. They can create a video, a poster, a paper, an oral report, a collage. One girl who's not good with English uses the computer and does sort of like animated comic presentation. I think this is just like it's pretty simple what's going on here, I think, but it makes all the difference. I think that they have multimodal means of expression to fulfill the assessment. It's still the same benchmarks and goals in the assessment, but how they do the assessment is up to them, which is really how I want my classroom, and how I see it in the future, how I'm going to sort of probably provide assessments. I know you can't always do it in this way, and sometimes, especially to prepare them for standardized testing, you can't always have them doing posters and videos. But I really think the more multimodality you can use in the classroom, the better. Also with new literacies, I've been thinking about how I can try and update some of the canonical works within the English. Like there's graphic novels for Romeo and Juliet. There's different versions. There's No Fear Shakespeare for Shakespeare too. And there's just different types of books, different types of cultural books. And then there's new ways like using Facebook or Twitter or different things like that. I think I talked about it a little bit, but I really think that one of the biggest challenges our students face is the world is becoming very technology driven, and it's only going to continue with that. And so I think that it's so imperative that they understand not only just certain programs, but how to go about learning in a technology driven world in general, how to figure out using things for themselves. I think it's not about the specific programs, but more about the skills, what like they're learning from new literacies. And I think that goes hand in hand with UDL. If you can use multiple means of representation in the classroom, that ultimately means that I think can connect to multimodality and new literacies. which honestly I think that's where the educational field is and should be heading. So I'm really excited to be a part of that eventually. But yeah, thanks. Sorry this is so long. I'm really sorry. But hopefully I've talked about my thoughts enough. And yeah, thanks. Bye.